Do that virtual background fuzzy thing that y'all did. That's great. Why can't I do it?
Okay. This is way more unnerving than teaching.
Oh no, I didn't mean to do that. Hold on. There we go.
It totally is more nerve-wracking. I mean, I'm like, public speaking is not my thing. So I've been like all excited all day.
Yeah, I didn't sleep much last night.
Mm.
I'm sure AMPA had something to do with that, but
Terrible.
It is different talking to your colleagues and talking to people older than you than it is talking to people younger than you. I don't know. Psychologically, it feels different.
I prefer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think I get a pretty extreme end of that because, like, as someone who is comparatively to all of you, not at all qualified, it sort of feels like if I there's a lot riding on this for my personal self-esteem.
To be honest, you've experienced more hybrid learning than the rest of us.
That's probably true.
Sam, I think you're probably the most qualified because you are on the receiving end of it.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, you got me.
All right. Well, I guess everyone who doesn't want to be hot mic'd, mute yourself, and I'll let everyone in.
and I can guarantee you, Sam, people are glad you're here.
Okay, I'm hitting the button now.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, welcome everyone. We will give it a couple minutes here. All right. Well, it's 6:32. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes, and then we will get started. Looks like we got quite a large number there already. I'm sure many people are wondering what I'm doing with a collar. Hi, Charmaine. Looks like you got in.
I'm gonna say that out loud, Jason, because it's really, really cool to see people that I've like seen virtually and just been in spaces with virtually on here. It's really hype. Thank you, everybody. So excited. Hey, hey. Got so many people.
All right, I'm gonna get one more minute. It's very hard. I just kind of want to check out the chat and whatnot, but I should probably stay focused.
You're missing out.
I did peruse the list a few times and saw a lot of names I knew, but way more that I didn't. So. All right, it's 6:35. I don't know if people want me to wait longer, I can. I still see a few in the waiting room. Okay, I'm gonna get started because I'll probably talk for a few minutes here, and I don't really think people are here to see me, so that'll give time for more people to get in.
Aaron,
Sorry, go ahead.
Have you assigned someone to let folks in, or who's doing that?
A variety of people.
Okay, I'll hit as well, so don't worry about it.
Okay,
yeah,
thanks.
no worries.
I've got a lot of help here today, and I really appreciate that. I'm gonna start appropriately, of course, with the land acknowledgement. I'm going to use the one I use in the union meetings. I will, I guess, change it a little bit, but so I want to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the people, Credit First Nation peoples of this territory, as well as the Anishinaabe, Attawandarock, Haudenosaunee, Ottawa, Petun, and Huron-Wendat peoples of territories throughout the surrounding area, in addition to the Indigenous peoples of the land or territory where you are participating from this evening, for sharing this land so that we may come together in a good way. My name is Aaron Gervais. I'm a longtime teacher now. I think I'm in my 17th year in the Peel District School Board. I'm the PAC chair at D19. And I'm just thrilled to welcome everybody here today. The number of people that turned out is amazing. And so, you know, I just want to say thank you to everybody for showing up. It's awesome to have everybody here. The way we're going to run this town hall is we're going to have I'm going to do very brief speaking because I know you're not here to see me, but we got 4 amazing speakers that all are going to provide us with some wonderful thoughts, I'm sure. For those of you that might have been at AMP or other things, the chat's going to be open. I just ask that, you know, try to stay focused. But we are going to have a Q&A afterwards. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the name. I'm hoping one of the people helping out here can do this. There's Zane Gadiali and sorry, Zane, I kind of messed your last name up there. Gadiali and Ryan Sparrow. Can you direct message either Zane or Ryan your questions? And then we're going to kind of correlate those questions and we will give them to the speakers once we've had the four people speak. That's just a way to kind of keep it focused in that way. So once again, can you send Ryan or Zane your questions? Just direct message them questions in the chat for any or all of the speakers. Okay. Other than that, I think we'll get started here. You know, how did this thing even come about? Well, I prepared some notes, but I think I'll try to just go off my head. At the start of the year, I was together with some teachers, and we were all kind of talking about how this was going to be another unprecedented year, another strange year, and it came up that there was a lot of frustration, and one of the frustrations was that people felt that maybe the general public didn't really know what was going on in schools and how these changes were impacting schools. And of course, that makes sense because there was no general public involved in any of these consultations, right? It's not like the government consulted us or the public or teachers or anybody. So there's frustration. But we talked a little further, and then it really came apparent pretty quickly that there would be no point in holding a meeting that was teacher-centered or teacher-focused. What would be the purpose of that? And so we quickly realized that this should be a community event. And that really became the aim at this point, was to turn this into a community town hall. Bring together all the relevant stakeholders on the issues, okay? And so, that's why we reached out to students, to parents, to education workers, and this was just an open invite, right? And anybody who wanted to come was welcome to come. As teachers, we knew what our experience and perspective was, but did we really have a great idea of what students thought or what parents thought? So that was the concept behind it, okay? I know some of you out there, but most of you I don't know. But what I'm really confident of is that everybody here cares about quality public education, and that's why you're here. Whether you're an education worker, a student, or a parent, you're being impacted by these changes right now, and that's why you're here tonight. So, you want the best possible public education in Ontario, and that's why you're here, and that's I think we're all here. The other thing that's been really, really clear over the last few years is that if we're going to have absolutely any success at trying to have strong public education in Ontario, this is going to be a combined effort. Okay, I mean, we all know what the teachers, we had our strike and whatnot, but I think the thing that was so impressive to all of the teachers was the impact that parent and community groups had on the government. And that is so important. We're all in this together. We cannot be divided. We can't, this never work. This will never work if we're not working together and trying to build bridges and build bonds between educators, the community, parents, students. Everybody needs to come together in this thing. And, I think that's why we're here tonight, to build these bridges and to join forces and to share our ideas. The last thing I want to say is that, a lot of people came up to me over a lot. No, well, nobody comes up to me but people have said to me via Zoom and other things, how did you get this great lineup of speakers? What did you do to get these great speakers? And quite honestly, all I did was ask. I don't know any of them personally. I simply just reached out and said, hey, I'm thinking, we're thinking of holding this town hall on hybrid learning. Would you be willing to participate? And they all said yes. And quite frankly, I didn't ask why. But I think I know why, because they really care about public education as well. That's why they're here. It's important to them, like it is to me, and I'm sure it is to the rest of you. And they're worried about these changes that are taking place. They're worried about things like hybrid learning. I think we all realize that these changes are here and they're probably not going away anytime soon. But what we want is a voice in ensuring that these changes are going to, take into consideration what's best for everybody involved in this process. That, we're working together to assure that all of our needs are met in this process. And we can only do that by working together, parents, students, communities, teachers, all education workers, everybody in the community. right, so I'm rambling on enough here. I'm going to stop. I'm really excited to present these guest speakers. First up, we have Behan Farhadi. I can read her resume. I'll do it here. I'm sure many of you know her. You know, she's does a lot of appearances and is really talented. She's postdoctoral research and faculty of education at York University. Secondary teacher with Toronto District School Board, a parent with 2 elementary age children, and an advocate for fully funded public education. Her research focuses on educational policy, online learning, and equity in secondary schools. And with that, I will mute myself and welcome Behan.
Thank you. That was really a warm introduction, and it's just so, can you hear me okay, clearly? I always have to do that tech check. We're good, okay. Feel free to just unmic and like interrupt me if all of a sudden I experience tech issues. Really grateful to be in this space with you all. So many familiar names, and familiar not because I know you personally, but you've been involved in organizing. There's been lots of work to do these last few years, and there's still a lot of work to do. So thank you for bringing me into this space, the organizers for the work, and the panelists for their contribution. Don't mean to put you on the spot, Sam, but I think it was mentioned that like student voice has been missing in so many of these conversations. So I'm really especially grateful that you're here. And each panelist will offer a different perspective on a crisis model of education that is referred to as hybrid. I'll pull up my slides and just so things are a little bit accessible. Let me go off video first. Okay. All right, so this model is also called hybrid flexible, concurrent hybrid, concurrent, and blend flex. Although in an interview last week with CBC News, I started referring to it as the split attention model, because as the title of this panel has made explicit, and I love this, teaching online and in person at the same time doesn't make sense. And so I hope in this time that we have today, you'll appreciate why that is. And before I get into that, I want to place an emphasis on the urgency of this conversation, because I've seen this model snowball at a speed that concerns me. Hybrid learning, as it has been referred to historically, has integrated online and offline education, but almost never at the same time. And the first evidence of this model that I could find is in 2006 in San Francisco State University, developed by Professor Brian J. Beatty in order to recruit graduate students for a master's degree program. And so this is his book about this model, which is available for free online. And in it, he defines what he calls this high flex model as a student-directed multimodal experience. Kind of sounds like you're attending a movie, you're going to a movie. Students choose between attending and participating in class sessions in a traditional classroom or lecture hall setting or online environment. Online participation is available in synchronous, which is live, or asynchronous, which is at your own pace. So in that mode, and sometimes both, and sometimes it's only in one online mode. So there's been about a dozen attempts to brand this, including most recently concurrent models, or what's called concurrent hybrid models of instruction. So what makes this model successful for graduate students? It was designed for. It requires personal and technical resources, including hardware, a reliable network, the ability to independently navigate online learning platforms, and the ability to learn through mediated experiences. It also requires personal time management, which is a critical success factor for these high flex students who chose online participation. And instructors who experience success are provided time to develop a course that can be delivered in 2 modes. They're provided support, with flexibility in delivery options and instructional design. And they work in classrooms that have investments in technology to capture in-person activities and integrate online activities into the classroom. In short, hybrid is labor intensive and expensive. And a recent study that applied this model in the context, again, of graduate students, social work educators, also revealed interesting results. It found that even though students might have predicted that they would have chosen face-to-face, their intent didn't match their practice. And so this is interesting. I've seen educators teaching hybrid, including Jason on the panel, who've posted photos of them sitting alone in classrooms of 1 or 2 students while the remainder are at home. And I've heard teachers I've interviewed for my own work, my own research, talk about this, what is often described as soul-sucking scenarios with a teacher in a class with 1 student and everyone else online. So in this study, they also found it was time and not distance that was the barrier, and that asynchronous approaches for independent learners were more successful, and concluded that this high flex approach in a graduate program, I have to keep repeating this, is not ideal for all classes, institutions, or contexts. And so there have been attempts to popularize this model, but it hasn't been taken up because of the challenges associated with the model of delivery. And again, I'm talking in a post-secondary context. Challenges include the students' readiness, instructor preparation, and the significant upfront costs to outfit classrooms with the technology needed to succeed. And so panelists here will speak about these challenges tonight, but COVID-19 has made this model mainstream in the United States and in Ontario. It was Upper Canada District School Board that set precedent and kind of flew under the radar. And they most recently doubled down on their plan after one trustee suggested running a pilot project for a virtual school in areas with high levels of enrollment. They refused. Following Upper Canada were Dufferin Peel and York Catholic, Peel and Toronto District, and most recently Simcoe and Algoma District. And about half of these boards, especially the smaller ones, are rolling it out to elementary school students, which I personally find criminal. And so in response to this promotion of this panel on Twitter, I had a professor and associate dean of research and innovation at the University of Alberta suggest that it might be better to ask what would make this work rather than just resisting it. This is an argument we often make. I think it implies that it's better to find solutions than to complain, but this is not a complaint. I'm not lodging a complaint. I'm asserting a demand for quality education for all students in a public system, not for the small segment of students who are self-directed, well-resourced, and who learn despite their teachers. It is a demand to stop using online learning as a spatial fix by school boards. And by this, I refer to the fact that by their own admission, school boards are relying on the split attention model of hybrid because they can't afford to make online learning work, because to make it work requires more money than it costs to deliver education in person. It is a spatial fix because it combines 2 spaces that are too expensive to maintain independently into one space and asks teachers to split their attention across both. And so on the right-hand side, I've taken screenshots of some how to make it work videos. And what you see featured is technology, lots of it. One teacher, unironically, on the top right, is explaining that she uses 3 computers to teach hybrid. Another teacher below demonstrates the integration of iPads in her classroom, 1 per student. And school boards are, of course, putting out modules on how to adapt instruction. But I'm sure, as folks will explain, not even the most adaptable, tech enthusiastic teacher can make this work for every student. And so we must remember that the context of this conversation today is a public education system, not a graduate program that is already underfunded, and that it's responding, that this program, this model of delivery is responding to this lack of funding by forcing students who are in a formative stage of development into a hybrid model, which also splits their community of peers and creates a 2-tiered system of learning. In short, we are forcing students to learn as if they're self-directed adults paying thousands of dollars to attend an elite graduate program. And so I'm just going to stop sharing here. Let's see here. Pause share. Oh, here we go. Okay. There we go. Now you can see me. So yeah, it's part of, and I'll sort of speak to you for the rest of it. As part of my research on, I've spoken to teachers about their experiences teaching during the pandemic, and part of this work, I've actually read a lot about crisis management, and what I've learned, which was both surprising and revelatory and explanatory, was that historically governments don't often do what the public expects them to do during a crisis. They rarely meet the expectation to work proactively to respond equitably to an immediate crisis. And the reason for this is because decisions are often political, and crisis leaves room to reshape memory after disaster. And so governments have historically reshaped this narrative around their response, often to their benefit. This is why online learning has been so politicized, and why it does require a political response. And by this, I refer to the collective organizing Aaron gestured to, and many folks in this room have been engaged in, to refuse the use of technology to cut corners in funding public education. And so I began by describing this hybrid model of delivery as emerging quietly decades ago, but it really wasn't until the pandemic that it was adopted as a model of delivery in K-12 education. And so I really must be like, I'm super emphatic about this. I want to say that it's crisis that has helped the public accept this model of delivery in K-12, because the implication was it was temporary, and a response to the pandemic that was forcing students to learn from home. But as we're heading into the next year with COVID funding that's already been withdrawn by the Ministry of Education, school boards have depleted much of their rainy day funds. Many are quietly continuing this model to meet the demand for virtual learning. And so we can't passively accept or make this work in an already underfunded public education system. And so in addition to my academic work, I'm also, as Aaron mentioned, I'm a secondary teacher like Jason, and a parent activist like Romana, and I'm occupying all these roles. And I've got to say, the greatest lessons I've taken away from it, and where I feel myself most useful, is in community organizing, because that's where I found the greatest gains in reaching for the kind of future for public education that I'm advocating for. Especially when you're talking about a public that's disoriented during crisis. It's often easy to forget the ways that crisis has rationalized what we otherwise wouldn't accept during ordinary times. And so my hope is that tonight, when you hear from the panelists, you're inspired to use your capacity to resist these changes, because there's no way to stop what sometimes feels like an inevitability without resistance. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mehan. That was really, really informative, and really appreciate it. And I gotta fight all my teacher instincts here to want to summarize it and go over those things. So I'd really like to get to the next speaker, but I can't resist. I love the call for the demand for quality education, and the points about the crisis mentality and how that has really formed a lot of the way that people are thinking about this. So, awesome, really interesting points. From here, we're going to go to Ramona, and let me read Ramona's intro here. And this, once again, this is the point of tonight, is to have speakers from different, with different perspectives, with different insights, so that we can learn from one another. So Ramona Sadiku, involved with many different parent and community organizations. Ontario Parents Action Network, OPAN, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that. Peel Families for Public Education, Ontario Safe, Muslim Parents of Peel Schools, and most recently co-chair of the Parent Involvement Committee, PIC, for the Peel District School Board. So let's please welcome Romana, and thank you, Romana.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Okay, so I am a little new to some of this technology, so I'm going to try to do my screen share again. And if you could just let me know if that's working. Can you see? I hope that's
Yeah.
working.
It looks good. We've got the slide deck up there.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. So it's been just over a year, and we've been hit with a crisis in the form of a global pandemic, and our lives were abruptly changed. 12 months later, and we're still struggling with our lives being interrupted by COVID-19 and the ensuing hardship and unpredictability of change. Adapting to the sudden shift in expectations has been challenging for everyone. Many people, children, youth, parents, elders, and educators have been feeling anxious. They've been feeling stressed, sadness, grief. Many students have experienced education deficits, severe learning losses, loss of focus, impaired decision-making, procrastination, withdrawal, and a sense of dislocation from the world. After a rough end to the previous school year, $1.6 million of pandemic funding was provided to school boards for this school year. That was after much advocacy from community members. And that funding was to assist with COVID-related expenses. This year, many boards adopted a quadmester model for secondary schools, and there was a lot of repeated reorganization and logistical planning by educators, administrators, guidance counselors, and other staff, and that happened over and over again. Initially, students, together with their families, were able to choose between two learning options, in-person or online. For many students, the in-person learning option was selected because it gave them a sense of normalcy after many months, a consistent routine. And it is really, in ideal conditions, it is important for their social, emotional, mental health, and well-being to be in class. There's no doubt about that. After being home for months, students once again were able to get up, get dressed, leave home, go out into the world. Our school board, PDSB, is a designated board, so class sizes were smaller, and although safety regulations and protocols were followed, there was still a big advantage that in a physically distant way, they were still able to have some level of face-to-face interaction with teachers and peers. So some students and families opted for the online learning model. Virtual school meant that students stayed home, and there were some benefits, obviously. There's an easygoing lifestyle. You get to lounge in pajamas, the convenience of a very short commute, which often consisted of rolling out of bed or stretching out an arm to log on, a limitless supply of snacks, no masking required, and thus for teenagers, less maskne, which I know with my teens has been huge, more control over immediate learning environments such as light, temperature, noise, distracting classmates. However, in some cases, prolonged virtual learning has also, not in some, in many cases, it's led to increased levels of student boredom, depression, isolation, lack of accountability, withdrawal, social anxiety, sense of disconnection, sense of warped reality, low engagement with schools, friends, and community. Some virtual students also lose their focus more easily, and they become distracted by multitasking and engaging in other activities, such as while they should be online in school, they may end up opening another tab in gaming or posting on social media, maybe straightening their hair or working out. Many high school students were also very uncomfortable being on camera or speaking when they're logged on, so information can often be apparently seeming one way. And then there's a huge issue of inequitable access to internet, technology, and electronic devices. So these concerns about inequitable student access, it continues. We know that COVID has exacerbated already existing inequities, particularly for communities that were already under-resourced and experiencing barriers. Not everyone has been affected equally by the pandemic. The social determinants of health affect not only who gets sick, but everyone in the community. Migrant and frontline workers, low income, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, multi-generational families, and others live these experiences daily. Many families here in Peel fall into these higher risk categories. And so a lot of students ended up opting for online learning. Indeed, if you superimpose the data of most at-risk neighborhoods, you'll see an echoing of the neighborhoods that have the highest online enrollment of students. As the situation evolved during the fall months, community spread and school case counts increased. So more and more students opted out of in-person learning and enrolled in virtual. In October, I think it was like over 50% of students opted for virtual distance learning. So as a result, our school board, as well as other boards, decided to shift to the hybrid model for secondary schools. And in this model, as we all know, educators simultaneously were teaching both online and in-person students, so cohorts A, B, and C. So there were some advantages. There's flexibility and stability for students. They can easily and seamlessly transfer between in-person and virtual learning options on an as-needed basis, and there's less disruption, less reorganization. I know my high schooler has certainly in quadmester 3, he's switched to virtual, but in 1 and 2, he was in person. The reasons for shifting between learning options will vary from family to family, and depending also on community transmission rates and other health and safety measures. Hybrid model also, one of the benefits was that it reunited students to their home school. Many of them had been placed in virtual programs, so it helped to reestablish those local relationships and a sense of community, and it was presented as a more fulsome school experience. And this, for students that had been virtual since last year, this had been missing for them. And it certainly was very difficult with the pandemic continuing and dragging on. But there have been a lot of concerns about the hybrid model. And so from a parental perspective, there was concern about privacy for students and families, a concern about increased security measures. And then there's the continuing concern about the inequitable access to internet, technology, electronic devices. I understand that the Peel Board has distributed something like 70,000 devices, but that's still not fully adequate. We still have a lot of gaps, not just with access to devices, but having consistent and reliable internet. It's understandable with multiple people in a household, multiple children in a household needing access, and potentially parents also needing access. It's been pretty unstable at times. There's additional drawbacks too. So I call it collateral damage. The connection between teachers and the students and parents, there seems to be a flavor of a lack of personalization of education. And this isn't through the fault of the teachers. It sounds contradictory to one of the pros of the hybrid model, meaning about the reunification of the school community. But the very structure of the hybrid model has necessitated a high level of almost like an automation or robotic depersonalization of education for it to be effectively delivered. So there's been an inconsistent quality of the educational experience, and it seems to be based at times on an educator's ability to innovate and adapt to these new demands, because this is a new model of education. And so sometimes the natural checks and balances that ensure student success, we are missing that. It's absent in the hybrid model. So the onus for succeeding or surviving is very much dependent at times on the motivation of the student and the teacher, because there's a learning curve in the learning ability too with this new model. So traditionally, teachers and students would be able to gauge each other's reactions with verbal and nonverbal cues. They could understand and communicate better and develop a relationship of trust, security, and safety. And in this hybrid model, this is significantly more challenging to do. So my son had actually, when I was chatting with him, he had told me some of this information. The next several slides are different quotes from families and parents. I won't read through them all in detail, but I'll just sort of skip through them quickly. So this quadmester, he's virtual. And so he was telling me the presentation of the classes seems to be very much more robotic since switching to hybrid. Now, Quadmaster 2, obviously, he was also in hybrid, but he was in person. And he was saying to me that it almost felt redundant being in class because you sat at your desk and you had to bring your device and you were following along with students that were remotely learning. It's just that you muted your device because the teacher was in front of you and you could hear, but the teacher was sitting at their desk presenting. Now, in some cases, now in Quadmaster 3, him being remote, he's actually had a more beneficial experience. But again, that's very much dependent on the teacher. So one teacher, for example, has been using Microsoft platform very well. Teams for class meetings, OneNote. She's also been posting YouTube videos and streaming. So, you know, it's sort of a mixed bag there. Now, these are quotes from other parents. I had sort of reached out and asked several in different Facebook groups and other parents and families that I know. So it's quite a bit of a range. So some people have said that they've had no issues and that things seem to be working well. If the child's not doing well one day for a headache or whatever, they can just log on remotely, so there's not an interruption. Other people have found it very disruptive. Kids are upset, they're going for a couple of hours and they're not really having that high school experience, they're not able to engage. So it really seems, again, very, very varied. Some people have had to take a little time to adapt and it's worked out, but parents have heard from other friends and family members that they've had terrible experiences. So I'll just keep going with a few of these. We're almost done. And so as you can see, again, with this parent, they're saying that their daughter is thriving in the online cohort, but her son had a tough start. So again, there's not enough face-to-face teaching is one of the concerns. A lot of downtime, kids' marks are slipping. This parent feels that it may be delivery and attention. This particular parent has 4 boys and it's been different for each one of her son's experiences. Now, again, having a lack of interaction with peers, having a sense of losing time, feeling that days are missing, falling behind, test-taking techniques, transferring that to online tests, there's a whole difference, a different skill set. So it does seem to, again, work if students need to self-isolate at home. But again, are we preparing that for next year, that we're going to have a whole nother year like this? So, and then the other thing is that right now the hybrid model is in secondary schools as well as some contained spec ed classes in elementary, but we don't know what it will look like moving forward if the board continues this. So I just wanted to wrap up by saying that, you know, in a few weeks, the Ministry of Education is going to be announcing their education budget and funding for the upcoming school year. And this past year, the 1.6 million was meant to be pandemic funding, and that's not being renewed. And that's crucial that, you know, as stakeholders, students, families, and educators, we need to voice our concerns and we need to provide advisory feedback to our school administration, to our boards, to the Minister of Education, to our MPPs. So I would just recommend that if everybody, whether you're an educator, whether you're a parent, whether you're a student, to go to www.supportourschools.ca. There's a template as well that can be forwarded to your local school council. We need to let our voices be heard, that we need additional funding to maintain stability for schools in this coming September 2021, and those decisions are being made shortly. Thank you. Now I just have to figure out how to unshare my screen. I think that worked.
Thank you so much, Rowana. That was great. You know, once again, it's so important to have that parent voice here. You know, who better to tell us about equity issues and community issues than the community members themselves, right? That's kind of input that educators need. And, when you were talking, it was so, it really hit me the idea that, yeah, as educators, we talk about, yeah, the students might be, withdrawn and we're not hearing them a lot. And we can make assumptions about things like, are they anxious? Are they stressed and whatnot? But, if we're getting a vibe like that, I can only imagine the level that it must be at home. Right. And when you talked about the lack of personalization, and the increased autonomy, once again, that's going to be felt at, as teachers, we're feeling that, but that's going to be felt so much more at home. And then I think one last thing I just want to, I say I really appreciated was, because this started because a lot of teachers are coming to me and saying, do people really know what's happening here? And when you talked about how you appreciated that teachers were struggling with all this tech themselves. And I think that, I think a lot of educators appreciate that some of us aren't so good with this stuff. My colleagues can tell you I'm not. I've gotten better, but it's been a learning curve. Anyways, thank you so much. Once again, it's great to have all these different voices. We're going to welcome Jason Bradshaw now. He's a veteran, longtime teacher. I don't know if he wants me to name years or not, so I won't, but I'll just say that he's been teaching for a long time. He's the only person I had met before on the panel. He was at Turner Fenton many years ago when I was there. But quick little insight here. I don't know if you remember me or not, but what I do know is that 2 years ago or so, I was at the Powerade Center handing out pamphlets for Ontario Education Workers United for the walk-in that we were trying to organize with the community. And I stopped him and said, hey, I recognize you. You were at Turner a few years ago. And maybe that's the reason he agreed to come on here, because he didn't know me at all. So, get involved with the community, folks, do those kind of things. Anyways, Jason is a bit of a social media star, deservedly so. He does amazing things. I'm going to be quiet and let him take the stage.
Thank you, Aaron. Good evening, everyone. I don't have a slideshow, so you're just going to have to look at my face. I apologize for that. So my name is Jason Bradshaw. This is actually my 14th year as a secondary school teacher in Peel, a science teacher in particular. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak to you about my experiences with so-called hybrid education. There's a little known sport called chess boxing, which is exactly what it sounds like, where you actually compete in both a boxing match, and in between the rounds, you actually move pieces on a chessboard and play a game of chess. And you can win the match by winning either game, by winning the game of chess or by winning the boxing match. Now, if you follow sports, you can probably name some good boxers that you've heard of, and maybe you can name some really good chess players too. But I bet you've never heard of anyone who has mastered either of these sports while trying to do both of them at the same time. And when I mentioned this analogy to a colleague of mine, she said it's also accurate because the stress and the disorientation of switching between two different modes of instructions, it feels like taking a blow to the head every single day. So what the Peel board calls the community learning model, or hybrid instruction as we call it, it's not the way that all regions and different districts define hybrid education, and Dehan touched on this as well. In some versions of hybrid education, it's students learning in person for part of the day and online for the rest of the day. The version of hybrid instruction that we're talking about, of course, is a synchronous instruction of online cohorts and simultaneously teaching in-person students in our classrooms. This is not killing two birds with one stone. This is throwing a stone at two distantly separated birds and missing both of them. On an ethical level, this troubles me as an educator. Neither group of students is getting what they actually signed up for. Under the simultaneous hybrid model of teaching, one group of students effectively doesn't have a dedicated teacher. Either the online students get someone who is teaching in-person students while they watch and follow along, or the in-person students, in effect, get to be a live studio audience while they watch their teacher tethered to a desk and a computer engaging the online students. Each audience requires different strategies. And as a teacher, I feel like there's a constant burden on me to perform two different tasks that require two different sets of skills at the same time, just like a match of chess boxing. This is a poor use of resources. Teachers are versatile. If you ask us to teach remotely, we can find dynamic and engaging ways to do that. If you ask us to teach in person, even better, because that's what most of us were trained to do. Asking us to do both at the same time severely limits our ability to do either of them, which is an absolute waste when there are so many extremely talented educators who can be doing outstanding work in either environment if they were allowed to focus exclusively on that environment. If you've ever seen the teacher desk in a hybrid classroom, you might have some idea of the constant juggling act that it requires. We have a desktop computer, we've got a laptop or a Chromebook, we've got a tablet, we've got a stylus, and sometimes even more than that. And all of these tools that we're managing while we're also trying to meet the needs of the students in the room in front of us. The steps that it takes to simply set up both a virtual classroom environment and a physical classroom every single day requires at least twice the amount of time, which is to say nothing about the time that goes into planning lessons and activities and making sure that they're equally accessible and engaging to both groups of students. The questions that I'm constantly asking myself: are there hands up in my class? Are there hands up in my Google Meet? Can everybody see what I'm sharing on the screen? Does everybody have an equal opportunity to participate in the activity? And perhaps the most important question of all that I'm always asking myself: is everyone deriving the same value from this learning experience? And honestly, I don't know that I can say yes to that question most of the time. The basic fact of effective pedagogy is that your lesson needs to address the needs of the learners. And learning remotely and learning in person are two different sets of needs. So what does a morning in my classroom look like? At my school, and to my knowledge, in most secondary schools in PDSB, the large majority of students are in cohort C, which is to say, of course, that they are learning entirely online. For the past 2 quadmesters, I've only had a handful of in-person students in my physical classroom. And I can contrast that with quadmester 1, because in quadmester 1, I was teaching exclusively online in PDSB's online secondary school. But of course, part of the reason why we're here today is because Peel's online school no longer exists. It was deemed more convenient to switch to a hybrid model instead of having dedicated in-person and online teachers. My question is, more convenient for whom? It's certainly not more convenient for educators, and I don't think it's more convenient for students. I can only assume it's more convenient for the school board and perhaps the ministry because it saves them money and logistically it's easier. In my class every morning, typically it's the online classroom that I get set up first. I need to get my Google Meet open. I need to get multiple devices logged into various environments. I need to make sure I'm sharing my screen. I need to get my mic turned on, my camera, sometimes multiple cameras. And then after all of this, I have to begin preparing for my in-person students. Usually that means making sure that each one of them has their own Chromebook. Because even though they are learning in class, the majority of their classmates are online. So of course that means that my lesson is going to be optimized mainly for the online students. If we're doing a lab or a hands-on experiment that day, I try my best to set up a virtual version and a physical in-class version. This is effectively doing the job of 2 different teachers. And it's not like I get twice the prep time to do it in. Obviously not. In fact, preparing just the hands-on activities takes longer than it used to before COVID, because of course we have to adhere to the safety protocols and make sure that everything is clean and sanitized. So that in itself requires more prep time, even aside from the online component as well. This means that some days the in-person students don't get to do a hands-on activity, but instead they have to make do with the online virtual version of an activity simply because I don't have the time or the means to set up both versions of activities and supervise and run them during the period. And I know that in some situations this is reversed. Some classes might have more in-person students than online. And in that case, of course, the online students end up basically watching a live stream of what's happening in class. again, feeling very removed from it. If this makes it sound like students are being shortchanged and that one group of students is always an afterthought, then I'm sorry to say that it is, in fact, what it is. I don't know how to be two different teachers. I don't know how to teach in two different environments at the same time. And despite my experiences in both, and dare I say my successes in each of them individually, I don't know how to be successful in both of them at the same time. Finally, I'd like to conclude by reminding everyone that this hybrid model of education is not only happening in our secondary schools, it is in fact happening in contained special education elementary schools. I can't speak to that with firsthand knowledge, but many of my colleagues in elementary schools have actually reached out to me and asked me to share some of their concerns and their issues that they've been having as well. They've described to me classes with no TA or EA support, split grade levels, and the majority of students requiring accommodations as per their IEPs. Students who need and deserve the most support are becoming understandably frustrated and discouraged due to having to wait for a teacher to get off their computer, helping the students at home and helping the students who are in this very same room with them who are waiting for them. Hearing impaired students have to struggle with not only the crappy speakers, excuse my language, the poor speakers of a Chromebook, but also having to hear their teacher's voice through a muffled mask and face shield, which prevents them from being able to read lips. And keep in mind that if this hybrid instruction wasn't happening, these teachers wouldn't need to have PPE on when they're talking to students online, because they wouldn't have students in the room with them, right? My colleagues have also told me about the equipment that they've had to buy at their own expense because what they've been provided with doesn't cut it in making this convoluted model of education work. And I can attest to that part myself as well. Finally, many of my colleagues have told me that they've even had to eliminate outdoor physically distanced mask breaks for their in-person students because they need to be on their computer supporting their online students as well. This model of education doesn't work in any classroom. Students are getting half of the experience they deserve because they have one teacher split between two jobs. Teachers are burning ourselves out physically, mentally, and emotionally twice as fast. We're filled with guilt and frustration because we know that we're not providing the best learning experience for our students, and it goes against who we are and what we do. If it's not working for students, parents, or educators, who's winning in this scenario? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jason. So many good points, you know, and you hit them all, you know, repeatedly, which is so important. The idea of value and you know, who's getting value from this, right? And how can you be two teachers at once? And on a personal note, when I hear somebody like Jason expressing the frustration, I'm wondering how the rest of us are even coping, because I've seen some of the stuff that he's doing, and I you know, if he's having problems, my goodness, I fear what a lot of us are having problems with. And once again, the cost benefits that are being described here, and you know, what are we really doing? Where are we deciding that the money wants to be spent? What are we saving money for? You know, it should go into the system. I don't know how to get myself centered, but it doesn't matter because I want to go to our next speaker, Sam Sargent, a student in Peel, and so important, so thankful to have a student voice here. Sam, welcome, and the stage is yours. I'm gonna hope the tech people can put you in the middle.
All right.
Great. Yeah.
Am I able to be heard?
You're all good.
Sweet, wonderful. Hey everyone, my name is Sam. I go to David Suzuki Secondary School here in Peel. Now, before I start, I just want to acknowledge who I am and who I can represent. So I particularly do a lot that is involved with drama. I do a lot that's involved with things related to social and community activism. And I consider myself to be an overachiever. And so when I'm speaking, there are certain student experiences that I can and cannot represent. So in particular, I'm not going to be able to represent students who either are struggling right now, students who have not gotten very lucky with the teachers that they've gotten, and students who socioeconomically cannot do as well as I can. I come from a very well-off family, and so that gives me the resources that I need to be able to do a lot of things. And in addition to that, I have hit the jackpot with my teachers this year. Every single teacher that I have to interact with in my classes or outside of my classes is phenomenal. And I have gotten so lucky. But unfortunately, even those teachers are having trouble. Very specifically, I took a sociology class this year. And I took it with one of the most talented teachers I've ever taught with, someone that really is able to bring the best out of her students. And this teacher used so many slideshows in class because of how generic this hybrid learning model forces us to be. I remember last year when I took anthropology, psychology, and sociology. In class, we were able to do so many interesting activities. We were able to do debates. We were able to watch documentaries and review them, group projects where we discussed ideas in psychology and sociology, brought our own experiences forward, and were able to share that with other people. But this year, it doesn't really seem like that, especially because when we are in class, the lessons that we're given have to be adapted to both in-person and online learning. And I really like the chess boxing analogy because when you're trying to play chess and boxing, you can't really design one effective strategy. You have to design two strategies and you have to blend them together and make sure that everyone can get along with that. It's incredibly difficult. And so on our end, it looks like, okay, guys, today we're going to wake up, and we're going to go and we're going to log on and we're going to see another slideshow. We're going to fill it out. And then maybe we can watch a documentary and go on our own and do a little bit of work there. I like to connect this to something called the sociological imagination, for those of you who are familiar with it, where thinking of why things happen is really important. I think one of the ways that we exercise this as a community is we talk to each other. We have conversations, we have experiences where we can not only look to ourselves, but look to our peers. And this has become incredibly, incredibly difficult over hybrid learning. I remember having really, really good conversations, not only with my classmates, but with my teachers and with the other kids at my school. Whether we were online or whether we were in person in the first quadrimesters when it was a solely in-person classroom. Now the difference is, although we can have these conversations, we have to be incredibly deliberate in the way that we look for these. So in a world where we are either being in person or being online, we sort of have this medium in which we interact, that we can set up personal conversations. But now, since even in person, we're sort of just in our own world, in our own bubble, looking at our computers, we're unable to connect with the people around us unless we go very much out of our way to do so. So while last year I could list a billion examples of this, this year I have gone very, very specifically out of my way to talk to other students. So for instance, I had a conversation about like the history of Islamic theology and like religious philosophy with someone who I know. But that was because he sent me an email and I replied to it. It takes so much just to get into these conversations that we would usually just be able to have in school. In addition to that, when we go into school, it's really hard to describe, but there is very little additional value to when we go into school. When we go in person, we're working on our laptops. I was in a drama class recently. That's the only course I'm doing right now. A phenomenal teacher, Mary Fraser Hamilton, who I believe is in here. And we were sitting at our desks on our laptops, writing out our scripts on our own, which sucks. Because I remember last year and the year before, being able to like just build ideas, do so much in that class. And now the ability to interact with people is gone. And so I feel that a lot of the ideas that I'm working on aren't going to be as good. And that's really important for me because I want to be able to say, you know, that I did good work in my last year of high school. I had those experiences. But unfortunately, I don't get that. The most that I've gotten this year out of that class in terms of a real connected experience is when I think it was the last class I went to. I went out of my way to talk to another student who I knew, and we, from about 10 feet apart, did some improving to build work on their scene, and that was good. But that was the only time I felt that way this whole year. In addition, with that drama class, that class usually focuses on drama skills. There's a very specific set of skills that you have to learn for each class. So for drama, we learn things related to acting, portraying characters, writing. For something like math, we would learn, different operations, different formulas, things like that. But now, in addition to that, we have to learn various digital skills. And these digital skills, a lot of the time, inhibit us from doing the best that we can. So for instance, in my drama class, I don't have to learn how, I don't only have to learn how to act, I still have to act, but I have to learn, okay, what angle do I have to film at? How do you go about like doing editing? And this, for so many students, is a real struggle. For me, it's not too hard. I took a digital media class, and so I learned that previously. For a lot of kids, they're learning on the fly how to do, like, using Adobe Premiere Pro, which is a professional editing software that takes years to learn. And they have to do that as they do their projects, which is kind of ridiculous. Getting past that, we have to look at how students can get a hold of online resources. So first off, again, I have to acknowledge my personal situation. So my family is well off enough where we can provide for ourselves in terms of online resources. For instance, I have been able to buy a laptop. We have been able to get a better Wi-Fi plan. We have been able to get Google Mesh internet, all so we can function online. But that just highlights the immense financial barrier that every student now has to get through just to do their classes. For instance, I had to buy every student in my class had to work with an editing software. And me, I can get my hands on Adobe Premiere Pro. But a lot of people there are going to be working with softwares that just don't do as much, that don't have the things that they need. Where regularly we would be in school, and those school computers have those programs on them. And so having to learn in a hybrid way means that we not only have to purchase the resources for ourselves, but we can't use the resources that were already in school, even when we are in school, for various reasons in that class. One of the biggest things about being in school is being able to build relationships, especially with teachers. And this presents a lot of issues because right now, when we're in class, we don't have the ability to make relationships with teachers. These people in our lives that are supposed to be teaching us what we need to know, giving us a way forward. And so I was able, when I was in grade 9, 10, and 11, to make really good relationships with a lot of really good teachers. So for instance, again, Mary Fraser Hamilton, someone who I have written plays with, who I have learned how to act with. She was an immense force in me, like getting into acting, getting into like local community politics, things like that. And I wouldn't have had that if I had been online, because the most she would have known of me wasn't, when I went into class and was able to do like a Karate Kid but rock paper scissors sketch for my first drama assignment. It's when I put my hand up in class on a screen and answer here, and that's it. It is severely disappointing the way that a lot of kids in my school have had that experience taken away from them, being able to meet teachers even in person with masks on, of course, and being able to interact with them. Because often, as Jason said, they're focused on that online crowd, which is like 30 kids when the in-person crowd is like 3. There are also a lot of very specific groups of people who who need those connecting experiences to survive in school. For instance, I'm a queer student. I participate in my school's Free to Be Me club, ran by another teacher who's in here. And I have been really able to build a community there. Participate in a community. I didn't build it, of course. But it's a really good experience being there. And there, I'm allowed to listen to other experiences of other kids. And recently, I heard from a transgender friend of mine that they were being misgendered by a teacher, which really breaks my heart, because that's not something that we should have to fix. And one of the ways that we can get around that, we can build in-person relationships with our teachers. And because of this hybrid system, it is so difficult to build those relationships, to see that humanity in your students. And so for a lot of queer kids, you know, being treated well by their students or teachers is that extra step where now you have to, you know, build up your courage to maybe send an email, or send an email to someone who can send an email. And it's such a way around things. In addition to that, I think of myself as an overachiever. I have gone out of my way countless times. I think I booked like 5 appointments with my English teacher so I could boost my mark in that class, so I could do well. But a lot of kids have a lot of difficulty with this. They may have anxiety issues, depression issues. Maybe they're just uncomfortable with their teacher because they haven't built that relationship with them. And so maybe they don't have now the ability or the courage to reach out, you know, and go through what they have to go through with those teachers. And in addition, when you have teachers with problems, so my significant other took a class that was very, very stressful to them, because that class was essentially self-taught. And especially for classes like this, which was grade 12 calculus, that's not an easy class to teach yourself. And so having that minimal attention from teachers really, really can get to you in that way. And then in addition to that, this deliberate engagement is something I really want to focus on, where it, how do I say this? It disadvantages kids who don't have a very specific set of skills. And those skills are mostly, what's the word? You know what, I'll paraphrase. It's the one where you go to someone, initiative. Initiative. Kids who don't have initiative are really, really disadvantaged by this, because now there is a massive barrier between them and their teacher, and them and the rest of the students in their class. So for instance, again, my significant other, I was in a class where they didn't know anyone. And so even in going into school, everyone's on their computer doing what they have to because the teacher's teaching to a computer. It's a very, very difficult situation to maneuver if you don't have that very, very specific set of skills. And then finally, just as an end note, I am really involved in extracurriculars. I like being able to do drama club, which I was involved in last year, jam band, arts council, international science debate team. All of these are run by wonderful teachers who are able to recruit students through knowing them and through being able to see their work and their personality. And this year, while I have run international science debate team, it has been incredibly difficult to recruit students because people only have connections now to the people that are in their immediate friend group. They don't get to go into school and make connections with other people or make connections with teachers because there is no attention being paid to anything outside of that computer lesson, even when you're in school. And so it's been severely disappointing, but arts clubs don't exist anymore. And even in international science debate team, we had a turnout that was significantly lower than last year because we weren't able to attract more kids. So in conclusion, and I've gone on for a while, this stuff matters. A lot of kids are having a really, really difficult time. And I think that we just need to find some way, especially for kids who might need references for post-secondary, for kids who are just getting into high school, for people that have trouble learning, for people that need their futures to be influenced positively. We need to find some sort of solution that allows for these people to positively interact with our education system. Because as was said earlier, public education matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. When I first met you, whatever, half an hour ago, maybe, a little longer than that, you expressed, maybe you didn't feel comfortable being on the same stage as everybody else. And I mean, no offense to the other presenters, but I think you kind of stole the show there. That was amazing. And very, very much appreciated by myself, but I think I can speak for the rest of the people here and say that that was very much appreciated. I think you said a lot of things that we needed to hear, a lot of things that we'd been thinking and we were feeling, but you really put a genuine face to that, and very, very much appreciated. All the speakers brought a lot of ideas together here. And once again, Sam pointed out stuff that all of us know and feel in the classroom, but it's so critical to hear it from him. The idea that we're not making the same connections, we're not having the same experiences, we're not able to work together in groups, we're not able to produce those amazing products that come out of group work and group experiences. When you said there's little value to going into school, I don't think any teachers would have taken that as an insult. I think that spoke exactly to what Jason was saying, that he can't provide value to two groups of students at the same time because it's impossible to do. So I really think, even though there were a lot of different perspectives, people were really echoing a lot of the same points, just maybe hearing them from different directions. And so that was really, really valuable. I thank all four of the speakers. Really, really good. One last point that you said, Sam, that really stuck with me is the idea of how we have to be so deliberate now. And I know myself as a teacher feeling that way, that I feel so unnatural a lot of the times. And your point about slideshows. I mean, I can guarantee you teachers are sick of slideshows too. There's no doubt about it. But, and that speaks to something that Ramona said, that, teachers are still learning this stuff too. It's brand new to us. How are we expected to do something that we've never done before? So, thank you so much to everybody. There are a number of questions that have been put into, I guess, the question chat. I don't know how to, I'll just go. There's some highlighted ones here. So I think this is probably for Ramona at first, but once again, anybody feel free to add your insight here. The question is, it's great to see a parent here. What can our union do to work with parents to stop hybrid learning and build ongoing solidarity networks? And I don't want to limit that just to the union, although that's a really important point. But, parents, what can we do to help you? You've shown how you can help us. What can we do to help you?
So I think it's important to really focus on working together. And I know before COVID hit, there was a lot of support with the community and with educators in terms of like the labor situation. I think underlining the fact that teaching conditions for educators are our children's learning conditions, and having that collaborative relationship and understanding that it's a win-win situation, making sure to focus on that and not allowing the division. I think in particular, this government's been very good at trying to pivot interests against each other and sort of keeping our intentions about focusing on the common good and the common goal, and sort of focusing and emphasizing about that. I think that will help to continue to build solidarity. I think at times, perhaps educators have felt that community members aren't as appreciative, and certainly sometimes parents and students may have felt that educators may not fully understand and appreciate some of the difficulties and challenges. So just focusing on our common goals, I think, is really important moving forward.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you very much. And everybody pay attention to social media out there. There are so many good groups. I listed a variety that Ramona's a part of, but we all need to get on in these things like the phone campaigns and the letter campaigns and the email you gave us earlier. It's so important for everybody. Thank you. There's another question here. Does the panel have any suggestions for teachers to develop resistance to this hybrid model of learning in our capacity as teachers? I'll read it one more time. Does the panel have any suggestions for teachers to develop resistance to this hybrid model of learning in our capacity as teachers? And maybe just a little context there. It was mentioned by a few panelists. I don't want to steal the question, but there's a problem with let's just make it work, right? So what can we as teachers do to develop resistance to the hybrid model in our capacity as teachers? I don't know if anybody wants to address that one.
And I'll just say that there's so many amazing organizers in this room. And I know, Chris, you had your hand up and you wanted to say something, and you're also like a great organizer. The Ontario Education Workers United, Muna's in the room, Ramana's in the room. Like, there's just so many amazing educators that are already involved. So just like email one of us and like send a message right now, direct message one of us to get like contact, and you'll end up on a list, and there will be actions you can participate in and contribute to the degree that you're able to at that moment.
If I can speak to that for a moment too, I just want to say that we need to remember that we all have a voice, and like, you might not guess it, but I'm a pretty shy and introverted person, but I found a voice on social media, and I found that just by putting my opinions out there, people listen, and word spreads. And sometimes the best thing that any one of us can do is just to be brave enough to put your opinions out there, and you find yourself being able to reach out to people, and it makes a difference. So all it takes is a Twitter account, an Instagram account, and just saying what's on your mind, and you'll be surprised the amount of people you can reach.
And I'm proof of that, because I just reached out to all of you. I'm horrible on social media. I sent Bayhan a really awkward direct message, and she answered, so I appreciated that. Okay, here's another question here. No one seems to be benefiting from this model of learning. Why was this model chosen over splitting in between online and in person? I know, Behan, you talked a little bit about why this model was chosen. I don't know if you want to.
It's cost. They actually have it in their report. They use it. What I always say is, like, there's no hidden agenda. It's always in plain sight. It's always in their reports. It's always in their rationale. It is to cut costs. And I think there was like a comment I wanted to respond to sometime back in the chat with regards to the fact that, look, like, there's a degree to which we have to accept that during a crisis, we have to, make accommodations. We need to have some fluidity across these spaces. But my concern is not about that. My concern is that we are not, it's one thing to tell families, here you have an online option, and that's, we have a cutoff and you can only change once per semester. And it's an entirely different, because folks, you want to stop that movement. And it's an entirely different thing to say, we're not even funding a virtual school, and you're going to only have the option of going virtual in an in-class environment, and have that continually be fluid. Because as we move away from the pandemic, this is going to be used. I'm saying this because historically, I have seen a pattern across space and time of online learning being used by the state to cut cost to public education across North America. And it's been corporatized, and unless we're going to ignore history, this is the direction that it's taking us.
Okay, thank you very much. There are other questions about, enabling corporate intrusion, all those sorts of things. But I think you spoke to the idea that, there's a privatization model out there, and it's not the future. It's in action right now. Maybe I don't want to put Sam on the spot, but there's a question here that I do like. It says, it sounds like there's a lot of trauma for students because of this model. And lack of socialization. What do we need to do to support students after this model ends? And I like the hope that the model will end. But Sam, you're going off to university and we all wish you luck there. Is there anything you can give us as far as advice as to, if things hopefully return to full classrooms? Is there any advice you might want to give us?
Yeah, man, I think one of the biggest things, and I'm not sure on a policy level how to implement this, but kids just need to be social. Like, no matter what their level of social competency, no matter what their level of really anything, it's just a necessity. For someone like me, I know that the only time I ever go anywhere is to class. And so when I go there, I want to make sure that I'm speaking to people, that I'm like maintaining like relationships with people, being able to like talk and do stuff, especially doing stuff. Getting kids to build relationships with each other, to have actual dialogue, and not like not the show for debate club, but I think that has been really fun because it just involves like mandated conversation. And I think that getting kids to build relationships with each other, being willing to build relationships with kids as a teacher is super important. Because I think relationships, your core relationships, the ones that matter to you, are sort of the ones that keep you going.
All right, thank you so much. It's getting to be almost 8 o'clock here, and I did advertise it from 6:30 to 7, knowing that I might kind of keep a bracket in there till 8. So I might take 1 or 2 more questions here, but I think then we'll wrap it up. How can we? So here's another question from the audience. How can we pressure boards to stop this from continuing? Anybody want to address that at all?
Well, I will say that boards have a certain amount of leeway, but really the pressure has to be applied to the government and the provincial government. There is a lot of funding. There has to be the will for them to spend that funding. And for a variety of reasons, we don't have time to go into all of those reasons, the provincial government is not spending it. And whether it's unions, whether it's educators, whether it's families, whether it's grassroots solidarity movements, we need to have our voices heard, not just at the board level, because there's only so much a board can do when they're being mandated, but we have to express our refusal to accept that this is the way it is. And I think really just reminding people that, there's elections coming up. Keep writing, keep advocating, keep calling. That's an important step, but I'm sure other people have something to add to that as well.
Stay mad. Stay
Can
mad.
I tack something onto that?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sure. I just want to make it well known that that's absolutely correct. I think it's so important that we take political action, especially to make sure that the people who elect the people know what's happening, know all of these things. So getting our message out, especially to voters, to people that have that ability to create that change, is super important. Because sometimes you just have to, instead of trying to convince someone on a board, you have to replace that person on a board with someone that knows the value of education, knows that the investment that we put in is going to be far smaller than the payout that we get out after.
Awesome, great. It's hard work. We know this. It's hard work, folks, but we got to keep at it. And Jason's point earlier that just speak up. Use what platform you're comfortable with. I was a horrible, nervous student. I would never want to speak out loud, but things can change. You can adapt sometimes, and sometimes you never know. I never thought this. I want to shout out to everybody. I never thought that we'd get this many people. I've been doing union work for a long time. I get like 10 people in a meeting. That's an accomplishment. This has been insane. So I think I'm going to end it there because, I've asked a lot of people to come out and spend an hour and a half here. But before I go on, I do got a few quick thanks. Okay. So I really need to give my thanks to Zane Gadiali, Ryan Sparrow, Mary Fraser Hamilton, the entire PAC committee at D19, I couldn't have done this without you. I'm not good with tech, so much. So thank you. I also want to give a quick shout out to all my colleagues at D12, D16, D20, the local ETFO, particularly the CPAC chairs in those places who over the last few years, we've reached out and made connections. And we're going to need to keep working together for the future, because our things that are challenging us are not going away. Huge thank you to all the speakers, Behan, Romana, Jason, Sam, thank you. And last but not least, most importantly, to all the people out there in the audience, thank you so much. Thanks for everybody coming out tonight. Let's do this again sometime, hopefully, because I don't think the challenges are going anywhere. So, maybe you'll see another town hall from me in the future, and maybe we can come together again. Once again, thank you so much to everybody. Have yourselves a safe, good night. And yeah, that's it. I'll stop rambling. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.
Panelists, again, thank you.
I'll stick around to say thank you. Yeah, great. This was perfect.
Yeah, it worked out really well. And it's because of everybody. Once again, don't be shocked if I email you at some point in the future. Who knows?
Yeah, I got lots to yell about, so you just feel free to reach
Yeah,
out.
please do.
Yeah.
Well, I think that piece of advice on staying mad is very important. We sometimes forget to be mad, and then we end up the fort again.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And he just chips and chips away at you until you just are tired, right? Too tired to be mad. So I feel like spaces like this are really good at making folks feel like there's a force continuing to push forward, and it gives a lot of energy to, even me, I'm tired, I need to sleep for like 48 hours, but this energizes me leaving the space. So thank you for that.
And we know it was a long weekend, so.
That is an understatement. It was I think someone put it so well. I was very, very cranky in a response to somebody, and they were just asking a really innocent question for more information. And I was just very, very cranky. And then they're like, oh, sorry. I was just asking innocently. And I said, no, I'm sorry. I'm cranky. It was last night. And he's like, and then he was like, yeah, no, AMPA feels, and I didn't know that he had attended AMPA. He's like, no, AMPA feels like you've taught back to back for 2 weeks. And I said, that is probably very accurate. So
yeah. And we had report cards today, so I was marking all the time too.
No, yeah, I had a paper due, and the paper I submitted it at 12:05 to the and it's actually titled building a plane while flying. And someone had put it, I think, in the chat, because I was describing it was I was working with my colleague, and we were trying to put together something on the work we've done so far on this absolute disaster of a